Welcome to the First Buck Podcast, where we feature stories about entrepreneurs and the people who support them. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, and welcome to the First Buck Podcast, brought to you by sky'sthelimit.org. We feature stories about entrepreneurs and the people who support them. Today, we're joined by Samir Goel, co-founder and co-CEO of Esusu, a company focused on unlocking financial freedom. Samir grew up as an immigrant family from New Delhi, India, and witnessed the financial barriers and struggles his family faced as new residents in America. These experiences later inspired Samir and his co-founder to start Esusu under the premise that no matter where you come from, the color of your skin, or your financial identity should not determine where you end up in life. Esusu's platform provides renters the ability to build credit by paying rent, property management analytics, and rental assistance to unlock financial stability for renters and property owners. Prior to Esusu, Samir co-founded Transformation, a nationally recognized nonprofit that used technology to direct excess food to underserved communities across New York City. Samir also previously worked for LinkedIn, the United Nations, and Venture for America. Samir's work has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Financial Times, and many other publications. He's even been named to Forbes 30 Under 30, Times 100 Next, and awarded the prestigious EY Entrepreneur of the Year nationally. In 2022, he was selected by Goldman Sachs as one of the 100 most intriguing entrepreneurs. Samir currently serves on the board of directors for the Museum of Modern Art, PS1, and the New York University Stern Center for Sustainable Business and Save Our Life. So, wow, we are super excited to have you on here. Thank you so much for joining. We have a little tradition on the podcast. We got to learn, how did you earn your first buck?
Nick, thanks so much for having me and that very generous introduction. Excited to be here. But, this question brings me down memory lane. My parents, after they immigrated to this country and sort of were met with their rude awakening, eventually became college professors. And I share this to say that when you're a college professor, you get these textbooks for free from all the publishing companies because they want you to use those textbooks for your courses. And so my first job at, I think, the age of 7 was taking those sort of textbooks and figuring out how to resell them for profit. And so I made a deal with my parents that I could keep 10% or something ridiculous like that, and I would resell them. And that's how I started making money. From there, I became a landscaper and very familiar with things like mulching and planting trees and whatnot.
That's one of my other favorite questions. Like, talk to us about a dirty job you had. So from basically being early in the book sales, maybe online, to getting your hands dirty in the garden. I think it's pretty obvious entrepreneurship was something in your career path. Talk to us a little bit about what some of the other earlier business exposure you had. I think you're probably the only person in the world that got free college books and university books, by the way. I didn't know they gave them away to professors for free. I remember spending a small fortune on those things, always getting used books when I was at university. But talk to us maybe a little bit about what happened after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it's funny, not a lot of people know that. And I think even the textbooks say, like, teacher's edition, do not resell. And I just broke the rules on that one. So hopefully that doesn't get any other college professors in trouble. But, interestingly, you sort of said that entrepreneur stemmed my DNA, but I don't know if I really thought of myself in that way, right? I think for me, it was really more growing up in a family situation where I was excited and interested in figuring out how to make money and do businesses. But my dream originally was actually to work in public policy and international relations. And so as a high school student, I always thought that I'd study international relations, then study international law, and eventually go work at the United Nations and be a diplomat or something of that sort. And so that was actually my first job after college, was working at the UN. And I got there and I very quickly realized that I hated bureaucracy and sort of ran in the opposite direction towards building things. And I think that's where it really clicked for me, that I loved sort of being in the action, building things, failing, figuring out how to make things work. And that was really around the time I started my first company, Transformation, which basically was incorporated as a nonprofit, but we would make sure that extra food from corporate events would go to shelters, soup kitchens, other institutions serving folks who needed food, and then built in a revenue model because it would help companies reduce their waste costs. And I think I made every mistake you could possibly make. But through that process, right, you sort of learn by duct taping things together, figuring it out, iterating, and learned a lot of things about what to do when I started the next company.
This is a great story. A lot of the entrepreneurs that I talk with that are within the Skies Limit community sometimes are struggling when they're thinking about what kind of business they might want to create, whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit or a charity. Can you talk a little bit about some of the advantages and disadvantages from your personal experience when you think about those things?
Yeah, Nick, I honestly think of nonprofit, for profit, et cetera, as sort of just like a tax status game. You can do a lot as a for profit that you could do as a nonprofit and vice versa. I think what's important to think about first and foremost is what is the problem in the world you're trying to solve. And what I always encourage entrepreneurs to do is make sure that's something you care about and actually believe in or have passion about, something you might have experienced personally. And I know that sounds a little bit cliche, but I think the reason it's important is because building anything is hard. Every day something great happens, every day something terrible happens, and you got to roll with the punches. And I think what helps you roll with those punches is actually caring about what it is. So you can't be an entrepreneur to be an entrepreneur, or a business owner to be a business owner. You actually need to care about the problem or the solution. And then from there, when you think about, for profit, nonprofit, hybrid, investment holding company, whatever vehicle you want to use, I think it's really about what is the most efficient way for you to get capital and scale it, right? So if the most efficient place for you to get capital is when you can tell someone this is tax deductible and you think you can get grants, great, go for the 501(c)(3). That doesn't mean you can't have a revenue model. That doesn't mean you can't have earned income. It just means that that's where you think you're going to get your initial capital. On the other hand, if you're really looking for a different sort of capital bucket that's more return oriented and you want bigger sums of money, maybe you want to go that for-profit route, raise venture capital, get debt financing, whatever it might look like for you.
Yep, that's very, very wise advice. Okay, so you have a deep passion, obviously, I think, for financial literacy and improving the state of the world and economic mobility. Talk to us how you go from transformation to Esusu.
Absolutely. So there's two parts to this story, right? I think the first is sort of a professional journey, and then the second is really a personal journey. On the professional side, after transformation, which still exists, by the way, my co-founder at the time, she still runs it. It's been rebranded, it still operates. But I eventually took a step back and ended up spending some time working in the corporate world for LinkedIn. And LinkedIn was an incredible company. I had tremendous learning experiences there, met a lot of great people, and really learned about what it means to scale something, not just sort of duct tape something together. But at some point, I sort of had this realization that I was learning a lot. I was making money for the first time in my life. My parents thought that we had made it, but it wasn't really feeding my heart and soul in the way that building something that really impacted the communities I came from did. And so I was sort of left with this gap in sort of what I wanted to be doing in the world. And my co-founder for Susu felt the same way after spending time at Goldman Sachs and PricewaterhouseCoopers. And so we came together in December of 2015. We met up at Max Brenner's, which is a chocolate shop in Union Square Cafe for those of you who live in New York, and just had this really deep sort of heart-to-heart conversation on how we weren't necessarily fully fulfilled and shared some of our personal financial experiences and decided we wanted to build something that could impact the communities that we came from. And so for me personally, Isusu stemmed from my parents' journey immigrating to this country. I think like many immigrant families, when we moved to America, we thought we had made it. Just get to America, it's all going to be okay. And unfortunately, that's very far from the truth. My father was actually mugged on his first day in the country. We didn't really have a place for shelter. And those experiences really set the tone for a lot of my childhood, where I just watched my parents work miracles without credit and with limited financial resources, but still do everything they could possibly do to create that proverbial American dream for us. And I just felt like it shouldn't be so hard for people putting their best foot forward every day to have that fighting chance. And so inspired by that and Mimo's journey immigrating from Lagos, Nigeria, as you alluded to in the intro, we founded Esusu on this core premise that no matter where you come from, the color of your skin or your financial identity, it should never determine where you end up in life. We started out building a savings product, realized it was the wrong product, and then sort of iterated like every entrepreneur into what we do today, which is making sure when people pay their rent, that helps them build and establish credit. Because unfortunately, in this country, we still have 45 million people who are credit invisible, close to 100 million people who are paycheck to paycheck, thin file credit. And that is a market that needs to be served with better solutions so that everyone can participate in our financial economy.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that story. And I'm sorry to hear about your father's first experience. That sounds extremely difficult. So, talk to us a little bit about the specific intervention that Esusu has developed. How are you using data to basically improve credit scores for the customers in the community you serve?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, the credit bureaus historically have always thought about credit in a very linear model, right? You borrow money, and if you repay it,
You get
uh,
credit.
you have credit, right? But I always say that credit treats you like you're guilty until proven innocent. So,
Right.
Nick, it's Matt, if I don't know anything about you,
Yeah.
we're just gonna assume you're a bad credit risk, and that doesn't really feel fair, right? Because it's not like you did something bad that you're then like, okay, now you should be in bad credit. And so what we thought about is, okay, how do we make credit more accessible to people? And really what we came up with was alternative data. And in the world of alternative data, rental data was really critical because for most people, it's their largest monthly expense. It's their most predictable expense. For a lot of lower income families, it's 30 to 50% of their income. And it's an incredibly powerful predictive indicator. It sounds so obvious, right? But the best predictor of whether or not you pay a mortgage is whether or not you pay your rent. But historically, that's never even been a factor in underwriting a mortgage loan. And so we saw this opportunity to take this incredible data asset and tie it into the credit system so that we could create a real win-win-win. And when I say that, what I mean is for renters, they now get something for their biggest monthly expense. They get access to financial system, establish that financial identity. For landlords, it creates an incentive for renters to pay their rent on time. It's an amenity they can offer that's differentiated. It encourages people to stay in their properties longer. It's great for them. And for the credit bureaus, they actually get to underwrite more people, right? The funny thing about a broken credit system is it doesn't work for them either because they want to be able to underwrite everyone because that's how they make money. But right now,
Right.
we have this huge delta that rental data can solve for. And so we built the infrastructure to connect that to the credit system.
Very cool. Yeah, I think credit is one of those weird dark markets of information that a lot of people are unaware of, but it's so impactful, especially as you're getting started, or if you're obviously an immigrant to the country without a history of making payments or having access to these sort of obtuse financial instruments. So sounds like Asusu is doing extremely important work. So one of the things I wanted to pick your brain on a little bit, you've had to hire a bunch of people to help build your business. You have a relationship with a co-founder that sounds like it's forged in the crucible of growing together and having a common mission. How do you surround yourself with great people, and what are some of the things early stage entrepreneurs should consider when they build a team?
Nick, this is probably one of the most important questions for any entrepreneur or founder to think about. As far as the co-founder relationship goes, I feel incredibly fortunate to do this alongside Wimimo, who's I like to call him my work husband, right? We've been through everything together, and that bond is what makes the founder journey so much more rewarding. But generally speaking, when you're thinking about team building, I like to think of it as a continuum. When you're early in your journey, you're looking for people who kind of resemble more of a missionary type of individual, right? There's someone who just cares deeply about what you're doing. They believe in it. They're willing to hustle. They're willing to figure things out. They don't necessarily need to have as much of a specific subject matter expert, but they care, right? And that passion is what's going to add the most value to your business. Then as you grow, right, that archetype of the right sort of team member shifts from being a missionary to more something like a mercenary, right? And I don't mean that as in like truly like 100% a mercenary, but basically what you're now looking for is expertise, right? And so then you stop looking for people who are just general athletes who just hustle and work really hard and care deeply, and you start looking for people that bring really specific expertise who sort of resemble more of that mercenary. I'm going to pay for excellence, right? People who have been there, done that, can help a company scale. And so that's sort of the continuum I see sort of hiring go on. One thing that I think is really undervalued, though, especially early, is trust. Trust is everything, right? Because building startups, as I alluded to earlier, you go through ups and downs. And what's really important is when you're sort of making a do or die decision or there's a lot of pressure or whatever, when someone else has an opinion, you trust that they have your best interest at heart, the company's best interest at heart, and you can have a really deductive and productive conversation. But if that trust isn't there, you end up being your own worst enemy. You end up having internal politics. You don't know where they're coming from. You don't know what their motivations are. That kills companies. In big companies and large Fortune 500 companies, you can get away with bureaucracy and politics because there's so much scale. But in a startup, that's actually deadly. And so you
Yeah.
want to be really intentional on the relational aspect of your early hires.
Okay. Yep. I've seen that in a lot of different teams. And I think finding those people that'll run through walls with you at first is so important. And then later, finding that expertise, as you describe it, becomes necessary. And those are sort of natural things that occur as organizations get more complex and you have to have specialization. One of the things I wanted to ask you about Do you have anyone that you've worked with as like a coach for yourself, or like do you have mentors and advisors in your career that have been helpful in helping you navigate, the entrepreneurial journey, your personal journey, and your relationship with success? Talk to us a little bit about that because it's different for everybody.
Absolutely, Nick. I'm fortunate to be surrounded by so many people that have invested in us and believed in us along the journey. And, they always say like success takes a village, right? I think the original quote is it takes a village to raise a child, but generally it takes a village. And we won't be where we are without that village that sort of supports us. One person that I can call out specifically, or two people, is really Jeff Weiner, the former CEO of LinkedIn, and Brian Rumau, who's his partner at Next Play Ventures. They were an investor in Esusu Seed Extension, and then they've sort of invested a lot of time coaching myself and Wamimo on just leaders and management style and how to think about the business, and have been instrumental in our journey and in really foundational ways, even just helping us think about things like our mission, our vision, our values and operating principles, and how to set a culture, to how to grow a management team, and sometimes just good old fashioned founder therapy where we can just rant about a frustrating experience, right? And they've been there, they've been in the trenches, they've scaled businesses, and you can have an outlet to have some of those conversations and have someone kind of help you work through it. And I think most importantly, I think they've really also taught us about the importance of taking care of ourselves, right? Early in Isusu's journey, we sort of always operated like martyrs, and sometimes we still do. But also, I think understanding that if we're not getting adequate sleep, if we're not having a good health and fitness regimen, if we're not investing in the relationships in our lives, it's a disservice to the business. If we're not creating leverage for ourselves, the business will fail. And I think they really put that mirror to us and helped us think critically about sort of our own evolution as leaders, and sort of how to get out of sort of being the scrappy founder where you just do everything, to understanding how to create scalability for yourself and an organization.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So shout outs to Jeff and Brian for being mentors, advisors, coaches, and thought partners through those different difficult times. I always like hearing about those types of stories because founders don't have a lot of places to turn to sometimes. It can feel like the world's against you and the challenges are insurmountable. But the reality is there are loads of people out there that are super excited to watch you be successful and want to invest and root in those conversations with you. So thanks for sharing that. I thought maybe we'd come to a sort of a conclusion with our quick chat today. A lot of entrepreneurs lack role models, lack know-how, and feel that taking a step to pursue entrepreneurship is just very frightening or overwhelming or scary, especially if maybe due to the circumstances of your birth, you just didn't even know that was an option. So maybe what tips can you give listeners for how they can manage some of those early stages, and what they can think about in terms of how to get started?
Yeah, Nick, I'll be the first to say that there's no right path to being an entrepreneur. And I want to really make this clear because I think there's this narrative in the media where you got to do the thing where you're in an Ivy League college and you drop out and you go and raise a bunch of money on Menlo Park, and it sort of all works out. And that is 0.00001% of entrepreneurs, right? And for myself and Wamimo, one thing that we did is we actually started building Esusu while still in our corporate jobs,
Yeah.
right? We come from humble beginnings. Every paycheck went to either student debt or building a Susu. When we then quit our corporate jobs, I couch surfed for a few months, and then we ended up sort of Airbnb-ing our rental to make income. And I took on $100,000 in credit card debt, right? And you do all these like little things to kind of make the journey work. And so I say all that to say that there's no conventional path to being an entrepreneur. Everyone has their own journey, and you need to think about what's actually pragmatic for your life, the responsibilities you have, the assets you have, and sort of where that sits. That being said, three very practical things that I can share. One is just nothing worth doing is worth doing alone, right? Find that support system. It doesn't have to be a co-founder, but make sure you have those people in your corner, because when the journey gets hard, you need that sort of support system to get through it. Number two, just get started. Like, don't let perfect be the enemy of progress. I think Jensen Huang famously now said that if he knew everything that he knew about being an entrepreneur when he started, he wouldn't have actually founded NVIDIA, right? And the sort of idea there is, one of the beauties is you don't know how hard it's going to be. Don't make it harder for yourself by thinking about every sort of risk and every sort of pitfall. Just start. Some things you can do: create a website, use WordPress or Squarespace or whatever. Set up your social media account. Text five people who might buy your product. talk to 20 people about your idea, get feedback, right? Have someone introduce you to someone who's invested in one company just to have them rip your idea to shreds, right? You can do little things just to get started and take it one step at a day, find those quick wins. And then finally, the first conference when Mimo and I always went to and we met at was the Clinton Global Initiative. And at the time, President Bill Clinton said, be caught trying, right? And that always stuck with me as, you want to leave it all on the court. So take your shot. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. That's going to be unfortunate. But what you don't want to do is look back and think, what if, should I have, could I have? And so, once again, nothing worth doing is worth doing alone. Just get started and be caught trying.
All right, I love it. So from the early days of selling your parents' acquired books to getting your hands dirty, to starting a nonprofit, to dipping your fingers in a tech scaling company and learning from some of the best, and then applying those things yourself to a huge problem. We've learned an awful lot today. I think some of the things that stuck out to me were really maybe the concluding comments you had around the 3 things not to forget, which is nothing worth doing is worth doing alone. And I think adding into that is like needing to take care of yourself. A lot of founders, like you said, they push themselves to a brink, but it doesn't matter if you're incapable of pursuing your mission if you're unconscious. So make sure you do fight for the long haul. There are times to sprint, and then there are times to walk, and there are times to run. And finding that balance can be difficult. I do think a lot of times you probably sprint a little bit at the beginning and then find the pace that allows you to endure over the duration, because it's going to take longer than you think. But I also think you do need to just get started. Your customers are going to teach you everything you ever wanted to know. They're your best teachers. And then finally, be caught trying, I think, is a really thoughtful way of just saying, you get one turn around this, life, and you can go make something of it. So thank you so much, Samir, for sharing all that stuff with us. Your story is really inspirational, and all the accolades you've earned. I think when we check back in maybe a few years, the list will be quite a bit longer. So thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Such a blast to chat with you.
All right. So at sky'sthelimit.org, we connect underserved entrepreneurs with volunteer business professionals for free one-on-one mentoring. We also provide business guides for all of our mentors and monthly funding opportunities. So you can sign up for free. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe and share this podcast. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the First Buck Podcast. Don't forget to join the community of underrepresented entrepreneurs and their supporters by signing up at skysthelimit.org. Click subscribe, and we'll see you next time.